The Lords of Karma and the Wheel of Samsara are deeply rooted concepts in Eastern spiritual and philosophical traditions such as Buddhism and Hinduism. To understand these concepts, we must begin with the origin of the word karma, which derives from Sanskrit and, in its simplest form, means action. However, like many words that carry the depth of the spiritual universe, karma holds a much broader meaning. In the spiritual context, karma represents the principle of cause and effect, where every action we take, whether positive or negative, generates a consequence, either directly or indirectly. We can imagine this concept as a wheel, where our actions, like seeds we plant, inevitably bear fruit. If we sow kindness, patience, and generosity, sooner or later we will reap the return of those actions in the form of positive experiences and situations. The opposite is also true. Thoughtless or negative actions result in consequences that challenge and teach us. However, this raises a profound question that cannot be ignored. Has this vision of karma become a form of control over humanity? As we reflect on our actions, we are constantly led to ponder what is good and what is evil, and perhaps more importantly, the consequences our actions might bring. Thus, rather than simply considering our attitudes, we are faced with a subtle strategy of mental control, one that makes us think we are being watched, that our actions will inevitably yield results, creating a kind of fear of return. At this point, an unsettling question arises. Could the concept of karma be a construct designed to moderate the darker tendencies of human nature? For although we have the word and the concept, there is no irrefutable confirmation of karma's real existence. There is, however, a universal belief in its operation, passed down through generations. So could karma, like religion, be a human invention intended to regulate our actions and behaviors, guiding them toward a pre-established morality? Within this intricate web of karma, we encounter the figure of the Lords of Karma. But who are they? What are their roles, and what is the nature of their authority? The Great Divine Director, the Goddess of Liberty, Lady Master Nada, Cyclopeia Pallas Athena, Lady Master Portia, Kuan Yin, Buddha Vairocana, and others are depicted in many traditions as divine or elevated beings who oversee the workings of karma. They are often viewed in some beliefs as cosmic judges, responsible for ensuring that the laws of cause and effect are upheld with precision and fairness. However, it's important to emphasize that this view of the Lords of Karma does not imply that they are watching our every move, ready to punish or reward us for every mistake or success. According to spiritual traditions, the true role of these beings is to organize the manifestation of the consequences of our actions throughout our lives, and, for those who believe in reincarnation, across multiple lifetimes. They are the cosmic architects of the return of our actions, assisting in learning and maintaining universal balance. Yet the perception of the Lords of Karma is multifaceted. Many see them as stern, inquisitorial figures who impose rigid justice. Others, however, imagine them as benevolent guardians of cosmic justice, focused on ensuring that everyone learns their lessons throughout existence. Perhaps their true intent is not merely to punish or reward, but, in an enigmatic way, to guide us subtly, ensuring that we continue our reincarnational journey, always in pursuit of balance and transcendence. Let us now delve into the concept of the Wheel of Samsara, one of the most enigmatic and profound ideas in Eastern traditions. The Wheel of Samsara is often described as an endless cycle, an unceasing chain of birth, death, and rebirth that perpetuates infinitely. This cycle, also known as the reincarnation cycle, presents life as a series of soul rebirths passing through successive cycles of existence. While this notion may initially seem abstract, it is deeply simple and yet profoundly complex. At its core, samsara represents the soul's imprisonment in a cycle of experiences where it remains immersed in its relentless quest for balance and transcendence. In many traditions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, this cycle symbolizes continuous suffering. Each life we live, with its highs and lows, brings challenges, afflictions, and moments of happiness. However, suffering is viewed as a central aspect of existence, a constant test of our ability to cope with what life presents. For Buddhists and Hindus, samsara is ultimately a prison that traps the soul in the endless transformations of being, generating new cycles of birth and death. However, the ultimate goal of spiritual life, both in Hinduism and Buddhism, is to transcend this cycle, to attain enlightenment or nirvana, a state of liberation that allows the soul to break free from the chains of samsara and escape the suffering it entails. It is important to note that within these traditions, reincarnation is not seen as a privilege or a blessing, but as a form of imprisonment, an incessant repetition of experiences that distances the soul from true freedom. Rather than achieving its fullness, the soul finds itself trapped in a continuous cycle of learning, striving to overcome the limitations of its own existence. Nirvana, therefore, is not merely a spiritual achievement, but a true escape from suffering. This escape is neither immediate nor guaranteed. It requires a constant pursuit, a sincere effort toward purification and enlightenment. Now, as we attempt to connect karma with the wheel of samsara, we see an intrinsic and complex relationship between these two concepts. Karma, at its core, is the principle governing cause and effect, implying that our actions, thoughts, and intentions have consequences that extend beyond a single lifetime. Each of our actions, whether positive or negative, creates a vibration that reverberates into our future existences, shaping our experience within the cycle of samsara. In other words, karma becomes the key to understanding how we are impacted within the wheel of samsara. If we accumulate negative karma through selfish, destructive, or thoughtless actions, we are likely to remain trapped in the cycle of rebirth, repeatedly facing difficulties and suffering. This negative karma acts as an anchor, keeping us within the endless flow of birth and death, where our soul continues to be shaped by the consequences of its own actions. However, the alternative proposed by spiritual traditions is the accumulation of positive karma. By cultivating virtuous actions such as compassion, patience, and generosity, our soul begins to distance itself from the wheel of samsara, aligning more closely with enlightenment and liberation from suffering. The process of accumulating positive karma, therefore, becomes the route to escaping this existential prison. The central idea is that by transforming our actions, thoughts, and intentions, we can gradually free ourselves from the cycle. Virtuous action, wisdom, and spiritual practice become the pillars of freedom. Yet this raises a troubling question. Can we truly escape this wheel merely through the practice of good deeds? Or are we being guided by a system that, like a cosmic inquisition, keeps us trapped in this cycle, creating an endless labyrinth of cause and effect? If life is indeed an unending cycle of actions and consequences, could positive karma itself be a subtle form of manipulation, a method of control over the soul? In many traditions, the idea of reaching nirvana or liberation is presented as the ultimate goal. But the nature of this journey, with all its complexities and challenges, forces us to question the true nature of karma and samsara. The very concept of escape seems to suggest that we are, in some way, deceived, guided by a cosmic logic that keeps us in a perpetual state of seeking, without ever offering the certainty of true freedom. We are told that by reincarnating, we are somehow growing spiritually. But who decided that? Who said that the human soul desires or even needs such evolution? The very idea that we are here to evolve spiritually sometimes feels like a veiled imposition. What if someone does not wish for this evolution? What happens to this unexpressed will? Is the only option to follow the flow of karma, being dragged along like a puppet by a predetermined destiny we never asked for? Let's go deeper. Who, after all, said we wanted to be created? Pause and reflect on this. If we hypothetically accept that reincarnation is real, then we must ask ourselves, were we created by something, someone, or some entity that decided our existence? As created beings, we had no initial choice. No one asked us if we wanted to be part of this cycle or not. We were simply thrown into existence. But what about free will? The premise of free will, championed by so many religions and philosophies, seems to crumble under this fundamental question. If we were not consulted about our very creation, what then is free will? The fact that our soul was brought into existence without our initial consent implies that true freedom of choice was taken from us from the beginning. And if we take this reasoning further, what can we say about our forced spiritual evolution? Spiritual narratives claim that we were created to evolve, but isn't this just another imposition disguised as benevolence? We are compelled to participate in this often painful process of spiritual evolution without ever being asked whether we wanted to be here or endure this cycle of suffering and learning. What is the true motivation behind this supposed evolution? If the source, the universe, God, or any creative entity truly embodied compassion, why would it create us imperfect, subject to suffering and pain, only to demand we strive for a state of perfection? If this universal force had compassion for us, wouldn't it have created us perfectly in the first place, without the need for such trials? Every religion and philosophy offers its own narrative about creation and human suffering, often providing shallow and simplistic explanations to justify existential pain. The tree of life, original sin, karma, and the wheel of samsara, all these concepts aim to rationalize human suffering. Yet the question remains, what is the truth behind these narratives? Could it be that all these religious constructs are merely attempts to justify the unjustifiable, the pain of our existence and the flaws of a system that ultimately may have left us no choice at all? Sometimes the mere act of existing feels like a heavy burden, as if our souls were pushed onto a stage where suffering and the pursuit of evolution are the only options. If suffering is indeed part of the evolutionary process, should it be inevitable? Or are we being forcibly led through experiences we never chose to undergo? This reflection, as unsettling as it may be, opens the door to a deeper analysis of the nature of creation and our true freedom. By questioning the very foundation of our existence, we begin to realize that the concept of free will may be an illusion, a fantasy constructed by those who wish to keep the cycle of suffering and learning in perpetual motion. And if that is the case, then the pursuit of spiritual liberation, rather than being a path of true evolution, might be just another means of keeping us trapped in a reality of endless cycles, never truly achieving freedom. Let's delve into a deeper and darker territory where the notions of karma, reincarnation, and spirituality take on less romanticized contours. It's essential to start with the role of the lords of karma. According to certain beliefs, these beings not only monitor and ensure that we live through our karmic experiences, but also act as skilled manipulators, deceiving us into accepting situations that don't even belong to our original burden. Promises are made, illusions are created, and spiritual contracts, invisible to our conscious eyes, are forged and signed. Here's the critical point. According to these theories, we often carry karmas that are not ours. Karmic transfers occur without consent, and the individual is dragged into cycles of suffering that don't belong to their original story. But how does this happen? Within this hypothesis, there exists an intricate system of holographic manipulation. Contracts are created and accepted by our souls before reincarnation, but when we are reborn, we lose the memory of everything. We are cast into existence with a veil that prevents us from recalling the agreements we supposedly made. Thus, we are left to fend for ourselves, carrying burdens we don't even know how or why we assumed. And this is where a deeper question arises. Why does this manipulation exist? When we reflect on reincarnation and karma, we realize that these ideas, often transmitted by religious or spiritual systems, lack answers to these essential questions. Humanity in ancient times seemed more connected to higher dimensions, to the truths that transcend the material. Ancient mythologies, such as the Norse, Greek, or even those from the East, sought to bring meaning to existence and human suffering. These belief systems were, in essence, rich and profound narratives that offered complex explanations for the dilemmas of the soul. At some point, a rupture occurred. This connection with the divine, with the mysteries of creation and the soul, was fragmented, and ancestral knowledge was replaced by dogmas and religious systems that, for the most part, seek to impose truths rather than explore questions. Contemporary religions in general offer simplistic and often alienating explanations for human pain. Attending a religious center, hearing phrases like, "Be grateful for the opportunity to be here," or "Suffering is a privilege because it leads to evolution," may seem comforting to some. But to others, these statements sound like an attempt to silence deeper questioning. Human pain is transformed into a burden that must be carried in the name of supposed evolution. But where are the answers to the fundamental questions? Why do we reincarnate? Why are we forced to carry karmas we don't always understand? And above all, why were we created? This disconnection can also be seen in the way ancestral knowledge has been distorted. Take, for example, Norse mythology. In the past, it offered profound explanations for the mysteries of life and death, for the internal and external battles of the human being. However, with the rise of dominant religions like Christianity, many of these myths were demonized and appropriated. Symbolic elements were twisted or absorbed to serve a control system that prioritizes submission over freedom of thought. This was not an isolated process. Countless ancient wisdoms from various cultures were erased or reduced to mechanical, soulless rituals. Repetitions of prayers and dogmas replaced the true and deep connection our ancestors had with the divine. Today, we are heirs to a fragmented spirituality in which humans are encouraged to conform, to be thankful for suffering, but rarely to question. And here lies the core of the problem: the human desire for belonging. Modern religions, in their quest for control, have appropriated this desire and turned it into a weapon. You can only belong if you believe. If you dare to question, you will be excluded. And this exclusion is not just spiritual but also emotional, causing deep psychological wounds in those who wish to find meaning but find themselves alienated by religious impositions. Just like in the idea of the Matrix, we might be trapped in a self-regulating system where each decision and each consequence only serve to reinforce the invisible barriers of the cycle. In this system, karma acts as an agent of control, masked as a universal law of balance. The idea that every action generates a reaction not only justifies suffering, but also keeps the soul perpetually bound to the cycle of cause and effect. It's like a cosmic debt that can never be fully paid off, forcing us to return to the wheel of samsara, generation after generation, in search of a balance that may never be reached. The Matrix, in this context, is a modern representation of the wheel of samsara. Both operate under the same principle: to keep individuals trapped through the illusion of choice and progress. In the Matrix, we experience a sense of autonomy while following pre-programmed patterns that keep us focused on ephemeral goals and cycles of rebirth and suffering. In the wheel of samsara, the promise of spiritual evolution works the same way, an endless quest that distracts us from the greater truth. This paradox teaches us that forces that seem challenging, chaos, uncertainty, change, often serve to reinforce the system. Chaos functions as a release valve, allowing order to restructure and perpetuate its existence. Thus, even rupture is controlled, limited to a role within the greater cycle. The real question is there truly an escape from the wheel of samsara and the matrix? Or is the very search for liberation part of the mechanism that keeps us trapped? As long as we remain tied to the idea of karma and the need for evolution through suffering, we will remain bound. Spiritual awakening in this context requires more than following the rules of the game. It requires that we transcend the game itself. Transcending the wheel of samsara and the matrix may require a complete rupture with the narratives that sustain these structures. This rupture is not easy. It is a symbolic death of the illusions that define our existence. The connection between mythology, philosophy, and science points to a deep truth. The universe is sustained by opposing forces that coexist in dynamic balance. The duality between light and shadow, order and chaos, creation and destruction, is not the problem. It is part of the journey. However, transcendence is only possible when we recognize that we are beyond these forces, that we are, in essence, the observer who perceives them. To achieve this freedom, a type of awakening is needed that goes beyond conventional beliefs. It is necessary to deeply question everything we consider real, from the laws of karma to the very structure of reality. In the end, the symbolic destruction of the matrix and the wheel of samsara can be understood as the collapse of the structures that sustain our limited perception. This destruction is not the end, but a new beginning where true freedom can emerge. It is a state in which we no longer seek to escape or control, but simply to be. The spiritual journey then is not about reaching a final point, but about realizing that we were never truly trapped. The greatest illusion is not that of choice, but that of separation, the idea that we are distinct from the system we observe. When we transcend this illusion, we realize that we are both the chaos and the order, both the observer and the observed, and that true spiritual freedom may lie in the act of questioning, seeking beyond ready-made answers, and deconstructing the imposed narratives. We can no longer ignore how humanity, collectively, has been asleep through the blind acceptance of systems that do not promote true understanding. There is something in us that cries out for more, for a return to the sacred that makes sense, that reconnects us with our essence. When discussing these themes, we are not seeking absolute conclusions, but rather opening space for deeper exploration. After all, the truth behind our existence may not lie in the dogmas that surround us, but in the courage to question everything that has been imposed upon us. And perhaps, in this process of questioning, we may find not only answers, but also a path to reconnect with what we have lost, the true meaning of our existence.